I never expected my life to take such a dangerous turn. One moment, everything seemed perfect, comfortable, predictable, safe. Then, she appeared like a storm, shattering the balance I thought would last forever. My name is Ryan, and until recently, I considered myself a loyal man. I had a steady job, a beautiful wife, and a best friend I trusted with my life. But desire doesn't care about loyalty. Lust doesn't ask for permission before it takes over. Her name was Elena. She wasn't just stunning, she was the kind of beautiful that made men lose their way. Dark waves of hair framed her face, deep brown eyes held a challenge I wasn't prepared for, and full lips curled into a smirk that hinted at trouble. She was married to my best friend, David. David and I had been close since college. We shared everything, secrets, dreams, even heartbreaks. So when he met Elena and fell hard, I stood by his side. I smiled at their wedding, toasted their love, and buried the twisted ache in my chest every time I saw them together. At first, I convinced myself it was just admiration, a harmless attraction. I never crossed any lines, never lingered too long when she spoke, never let my gaze wander where it shouldn't. But she noticed. And Elena wasn't the kind of woman to ignore an opportunity. It started with small things. A brush of her fingers when she handed me a drink. A lingering glance across the dinner table. A knowing smile when no one was looking. I told myself it was nothing. Until it became everything. The night that changed everything. One evening, David invited me over for dinner. His firm had him working late, so he told me to go ahead and keep Elena company. I hesitated, but he insisted. When I arrived, she answered the door in a dress so tight it clung to every sinful curve. "You're early," she said, voice soft, teasing. "David told me to come by," I said, my throat suddenly dry. She stepped aside, letting me in. The scent of vanilla and something intoxicating filled the air. Candles flickered around the room, casting shadows that made everything feel too intimate. I forced myself to sit on the couch, keeping my hands in my lap as she poured 2 glasses of wine. "He trusts you, you know," she said, handing me a glass. "I know." Her eyes held mine. "Do you trust yourself?" A lump formed in my throat. I should have laughed it off, changed the subject, made some excuse and left. Instead, I sat there, letting the weight of her question settle deep inside me. "I don't know," I admitted. She smirked. "Honest. I like that." Minutes stretched into hours. We talked, laughed, pretended nothing dangerous was happening. But the air between us was thick with something unspoken. Every time her fingers brushed against mine, my pulse jumped. Every time she licked her lips, I felt heat coil in my stomach. Then, she moved closer. "You ever think about things you shouldn't?" she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. My breath caught. "Every damn day." She tilted her head, eyes dark with amusement. "Show me." My heart slammed against my ribs. 1 second, I was frozen, battling every ounce of self-control. The next, my mouth crashed against hers. She tasted like wine and temptation. Her hands gripped my shirt, pulling me closer as heat surged between us. My fingers traced the curve of her waist, memorizing the feel of her against me. Then, reality hit. I pulled back, chest heaving. "David." Her lips were swollen, eyes filled with something wild. "He doesn't have to know." I ran a hand through my hair, forcing myself to breathe. This wasn't me. I wasn't the man who betrayed his best friend. "I should go," I muttered, standing. She reached for me, nails skimming my wrist. "Do you want to?" I stared at her, torn between guilt and desire. Every rational thought told me to walk out that door and never look back. But the moment her lips brushed against my jaw, I knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. I tried to pretend nothing had happened. That the fire burning in my chest wasn't real. That Elena's touch hadn't left an imprint so deep it haunted my every thought. For days I avoided her. Ignored her texts, dodged David's invitations, buried myself in work. But the more I tried to forget, the more I craved her. Then, the night came when I lost the battle. The breaking point, David left for a business trip, trusting me, of all people, to check in on Elena while he was gone. I told myself I wouldn't go, that I had learned my lesson. Yet, somehow, I found myself at her doorstep. She opened the door, dressed in a silk robe, slightly parted, revealing smooth, golden skin underneath. "You shouldn't be here," I rasped, though my feet refused to move. She leaned against the doorframe, eyes gleaming. "Then leave." I didn't. The moment the door shut behind me, she pulled me in, lips crashing against mine. I lifted her effortlessly, pinning her against the wall as she gasped into my mouth. Her nails raked down my back, setting my skin on fire. We never made it to the bedroom. The living room floor became our battlefield, heated, desperate, unforgiving. Clothes disappeared. Hands explored forbidden places. My name spilled from her lips in breathless moans. Every inch of her felt like a sin. And I wanted more. 2 days of lust. We barely left the house. Elena was insatiable, and I was helpless against her. She whispered filthy things against my ear, teased me with wicked smiles, pulled me into a whirlwind of pleasure so intense it left my body aching in ways I had never imagined. I lost track of time. Day blurred into night, and by the time we finally collapsed into tangled sheets, exhaustion settling in, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just want her. I needed her. She traced lazy circles on my chest, smirking. "Tell me you regret it." I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. I should have said yes. Instead, I whispered, "I can't." She grinned, satisfied, before pressing her lips to my skin. Good. A dangerous addiction. When David returned, I expected the guilt to crush me. Instead, all I felt was hunger. I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way her body fit against mine, the way she looked at me like I was the only man in the world. I told myself it had to end. But then, she texted me. "Miss me? I can still feel you all over me. Come over. Now." And just like that, I was hers again. The line had been crossed. And there was no going back. I told myself I was in control. That I could stop whenever I wanted. But the truth was, Elena had me wrapped around her finger, and she knew it. Every stolen moment with her felt like an addiction I couldn't shake. Every time I tried to pull away, she reeled me back in with a smirk, a touch, a whispered promise of things no sane man could resist. And the worst part? David still had no idea. A dangerous game. It was a Friday night when everything spiraled further out of control. David hosted a poker night at his place, inviting a few close friends. I tried to decline, but he insisted, telling me Elena had been asking about me. That should have been my first warning. The moment I walked in, I felt her eyes on me. She wore a red dress, short, tight, designed to make a man forget every moral code he'd ever lived by. "Ryan," she purred, handing me a drink. "You've been avoiding me." David clapped me on the back. "Yeah, man, where the hell have you been?" I forced a smile, throat dry. "Just busy with work." Elena leaned in closer, her breath warm against my skin. "That's a shame." The night dragged on in a blur of cards, whiskey, and stolen glances. Underneath the table, her foot traced up my leg. Every time David turned his head, her fingers brushed against my thigh. I was suffocating. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, David stood and stretched. "I'm gonna grab more beer. Be back in a sec." He left the room, and Elena saw her opening. She leaned down, pretending to adjust her shoe, and whispered, "Meet me upstairs." 5 minutes. My pulse thundered in my ears. This was insane. Reckless. Dangerous. But I followed her anyway. A close call. The second I stepped into the guest bedroom, she was on me, mouth hot, hands desperate. I lifted her onto the dresser, her legs wrapping around my waist as she moaned into my mouth. "You're obsessed with me," she whispered, biting my lip. I didn't deny it. But just as my hands slid up her thighs, a voice called from downstairs. "Ryan." My stomach dropped. "David." Elena smirked, completely unfazed. She hopped down, smoothing her dress. Better go before he starts asking questions. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady my breathing. Then, I forced myself to leave the room like nothing had happened. David stood at the bottom of the stairs, frowning. What were you doing up there? Think. Elena spilled her drink. I was just helping clean it up. He chuckled. Damn man, always playing the hero. If only he knew. The cracks began to show. I told myself that night was the last time. But Elena wasn't finished with me. She sent texts at all hours. Showed up at my place unannounced. Found excuses to brush against me whenever David wasn't looking. And no matter how hard I tried to resist, I kept falling back into her. Then, one evening, everything changed. David called me, his voice tense. Can we talk? My heart pounded. Had he found out? Yeah, of course. We met at a bar, and the second I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. Elena's been acting weird, he said, taking a sip of his beer. Secretive. Distant. I forced a laugh. She probably just needs space. He frowned. I don't know, man. I just have this feeling. My stomach twisted. If David started digging, if he found out the truth, everything would come crashing down. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I should have stopped. I should have walked away before everything came crashing down. But the thing about forbidden love is that it doesn't let you go, it consumes you until there's nothing left but wreckage. And I was about to learn that the hard way. The beginning of the end. Elena's obsession with risk grew stronger. She no longer cared about subtlety. She'd send me texts while lying in bed next to David. She'd press herself against me at gatherings when he was just feet away. Then came the night that sealed our fate. David invited me over for dinner. He said he wanted to fix things with Elena, that he thought they were drifting apart. The irony nearly choked me. I arrived, pretending nothing was wrong. Elena, however, wasn't interested in pretending. She brushed against me every chance she got. She licked her lips when no one was looking. She whispered things that made my blood run hot. After dinner, David got a call from work and stepped outside. The second the door shut behind him, Elena was on me. You're driving me crazy, she murmured, hands sliding under my shirt. Elena, stop, I whispered, but my resolve was already cracking. Make me, she challenged, eyes burning with lust. I was about to kiss her when the door creaked open. David walked back in. And his face said it all. He had seen. Betrayal unleashed. Silence stretched between us. Then, David's expression shifted from shock to pure rage. You son of a bitch, he hissed. Elena, go upstairs, I said quickly, trying to control the situation. But she didn't move. She just crossed her arms and smirked. Like this was a game. David lunged at me, his fist colliding with my jaw before I could react. Pain exploded through my face as I stumbled back. How long? He demanded. How long have you been screwing my wife? I wiped the blood from my lip. David, listen. He swung again. This time I dodged. You were my best friend, he spat, eyes filled with betrayal. And you did this? I had no excuse. No justification. Only shame. Elena, say something. David turned to her, desperate for an answer. She just shrugged. You were never enough for me. That was the final blow. Not the punch, not the betrayal, her words. David's entire body sagged, as if the fight had been knocked out of him. His eyes, once filled with anger, were now just hollow. He shook his head, stepping back. Get out. Both of you. I opened my mouth to speak, to apologize, to do something, but what could I say? So, I did the only thing I could. I walked out. The price of lust. Days passed. Then weeks. David cut me off completely. Our friendship, our history, gone. Elena, however, was unfazed. She called me, texted me, told me she wanted to be with me now that David was out of the way. But I couldn't even look at her. The guilt was unbearable. The thrill of our affair had turned to poison. Then, one morning, I got a message from an unknown number. Hope she was worth it. Check your email. Dread coiled in my stomach. I opened my inbox and saw an attachment. A video. My heart stopped. It was security footage from one of David's home cameras. Footage of me and Elena. Together. He had known. He had proof. And now, he wanted me to live with it. I threw my phone against the wall. But no amount of anger could undo what I had done. David was gone. Elena was nothing but a mistake. And I was left with nothing but regret. Because some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed.